A few years after Eric started building Fiona, he bought an old Bentley so he and his son Colin could work on it. It took a couple of years to get it roadworthy. Starting in 1980, he signed up for a rally organized by an enthusiast in Vermont, which was limited to Bentleys built when Mr. Bentley owned the company. In effect, Bentleys built between 1920 and 1931, known as vintage Bentleys. Eric and Edith owned a 1928 4.5-litre, which was a brute to drive, no synchromesh gearbox and a cone clutch which took real muscle to depress. The rallies took place the week before Memorial Day weekend and lasted 4 or 5 days, usually in New England. Sometimes the daily tours radiated from a central hotel, and sometimes the rally moved to 2 or 3 hotels on separate nights. Edith attended many rallies as Eric's co-driver. Later, after her sad death, Red Harting was the co-driver. When Red passed away, Eric's daughter Brenda occupied the left-hand seat. The daily tours usually covered 100 to 150 miles. A scenic destination was often the lunch rendezvous, with perhaps a classic car museum to visit in the afternoon. Eric made it to every rally except 2 between 1980 and 2019. He always drove to the rally and received many prizes for covering the longest distance to the event. Most drivers, who often lived in different states, usually brought their prized Bentley on a trailer. In 2008, Eric invited his old friend Lou to be his guest at the 28th annual meet and to videotape the proceedings. The meet was located at a lodge in Vermont operated by the famous Von Trapp family. Enjoy this unique video.
I think it was in the 1930s that the English club started, and over here I think it didn't really get going till 1980. At least the first meeting of the New England Bentley Drivers Club was in 1980 in, I think it was in Woodstock, Vermont. And since then there's been one every year, and this is the 28th annual meeting.
Good morning.
You guys ready to do this?
As ready as we're ever going to be, probably. She's so powerful we have to strap her down.
It's a rough hobby, but somebody has to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's fun to hear these cars start up.
Ready for another day of the New England spring. You know, I mean, it'll be 80 tomorrow, won't it?
Is this the way? And these were, you know, Wolf Bernato's, Captain Bernato's cronies.
Yes.
Which is Henry Birkin.
Birkin, yeah.
And Bernard Rubin.
Yeah, he's called Tim, right? I mean,
Yeah, Tim, yeah.
Tim, yeah.
Timothy, yeah.
They drove these things like mad. They didn't care what was breaking so long as they could keep moving.
How's the driving so far?
Oh, wonderful. We came up from Massachusetts, so we've done 250 miles yesterday.
Okay.
Which was, you know, easy cruising. And so we're really looking forward to some mountains. I'm from Switzerland, so you know, Vermont is just perfect, right? Up and down, up and down. So hopefully we have some gravel roads as well.
That's all she's got.
That's beautiful.
I think the problem was with the toggle down here. The shaft, if you look, the shaft should be loose enough that unless something's come totally out of alignment, this shaft is plenty loose. Do you know if this came off when you worked on the speedometer gear?
Yeah, I had that off.
You had that off.
That's why I thought
that
it was probably just dry.
Well, dry, or what about alignment on it? Moving this will let us narrow it down to down in the transmission or on the shaft. So let's start with just removing that or loosening that, and let's see what it does. Because it.
And I can't tell from the directions. Maybe you know where the stallion is. I was just looking kind of quickly.
The doohickey and the synchronator is misaligned with the dilly bob and
The Rasima-fram. Oh,
All
there we
parts
go.
falling off these cars are finest English workmanship.
Interesting. This is the ignition point set that I'm now holding in my hand. It really shouldn't be in my hand. It should be attached to the distributor portion of the magneto. So we're now going to put this back in where it belongs.
How did it get out? And why did it come out?
That's the better question. As you can see, it's on a tapered shaft, so that would ride in. That's the pin that holds it in position. And it just could be simply that it has vibrated loose, because as you know, these things do shake and bake. You know, if this was a modern car, all we could do is
fix it.
Call the AAA to come get the damn thing.
Exactly. What a difference.
You gotta love it. That's the beauty of.
That's wonderful.
Now, tell me your name.
Lou.
Lou. Tom Heckman.
Hi, Tom.
And tell me your name.
Lou.
Lou. I'm still Tom Heckman, and this is Mary.
Hi, Mary. I'm Lou.
Nice to meet you.
Here's the quarry. Here's a picture of the quarry.
Hello.
Quarry there. We also operate 2 quarries in North Carolina, 2 in South Carolina, and 2 granite quarries in Ukraine. Now, if you look down this corner here, one of the things that I did not mention, you notice water.
It's a little brisk, yes, but we're managing.
Brisk up here, rather brisk.
Nice. Was the notch unbelievable?
It was wonderful. Wonderful. Ah, Mother Nature.
We got in the elk business back in '92. I bought 25 cows and a bull.
Right.
And elk were very expensive back then, $7,500 a piece.
Right.
But we were in it for the antlers.
Ah, okay.
And we cut the antlers off.
Right.
And a good bull would cut 30 pounds. And you get $100 a pound for it, and you'd grow it back every year.
Mm-hmm.
Consequently, elk got even more expensive. We sold 60 elk for $8,000 a piece for breeding stock. We paid $41,000 for a bull calf to improve genetics. Then they found chronic wasting in Colorado, and that put an end to the elk business just like that, because nobody would buy a velvet out of the United States anymore. Come on, let's go!
Here they come.
Come on!
I got some movement here. Come on!
Feed me.
Specific goes where I like to end up. Yeah, and I have a ton of friends who are there, so for me it'd be.
Okay, well, this is actually my third Bentley. I had started off like everybody else with a 3 litre, and I keep a 6.5 litre in England. And I bought this car just about a year ago, and it came from a lawyer in Philadelphia, and he imported it 5 years earlier from Stanley Mann in England. And the car was rebuilt in early 90s, and it's a 4 litre chassis with an 8 litre engine. And from what I understand is the chassis was found some 20 years ago. It was kept as a backup to an 8 litre because it has the same tubular cross members as the 8 litre chassis. Mm-hmm. And a guy in England rebuilt it. The coachwork is from Rod Jolly. The car is now fitted with the Speed 6 radiator, and apparently that was found in Scotland. It was the Scottish police force kept it as a backup. And I bought it originally as an investment, but I live in Colorado now at 8,500 feet, so I need a powerful car, and the 8 litre engine with its 220 horsepower is obviously it's absolutely fantastic going up the big ramps in Colorado.
So this is car number 15. It is a 1902 Rambler. And it's a wood-bodied car. It is totally complete. It is the oldest known surviving Rambler. It's a short wheelbase. It's 72-inch wheelbase. We have all the original tools and oil cans and things that go with this car. So it is a complete car. And it's an 06 Pierce Great Arrow. It is the only 06 Pierce Great Arrow in existence. This is, next car up is a 1907 Stevens Duryea. I have the car because every part of the car is original to the car. This car was delivered to the daughter of the president of Pierce Arrow in 1912. She lived in Burlington, Vermont, and Birge, B-I-R-G-E, was the president of Pierce, and he gave his daughter this car. I have the original registration papers that document the registration and everything. So it's kind of a neat Vermont car that belongs in a Vermont collection. Pierce all of a sudden decided they were going to follow Packard. Packard was well ahead of the game. It was a well-engineered car. And if you look at my 1905 car, it is so far ahead of other 1905 cars. You compare it with the 1905 Cadillac, the 1905 Packard is miles ahead of that 1905 Cadillac, engineering-wise, comfort-wise, motor-wise, chassis-wise, everything. They really had their act together. And that's why Packard became obviously so successful. The last car up I show you was a car that both Bill and Doug McGee owned at a point in time. And we have tried to take this car to the total extreme of making it as good as we possibly can with every refinement that would have been available with a locomobile. It is a very large displacement engine. You look at the upholstery are copies. The original, the lamps in the top are signed Tiffany lamps. Inside, the 2 reading lamps in the back and the top lamps. The car weighs 6,800 pounds. It is not a light automobile, it's heavy. And it's a fast car too because of the powerful engine.
That's really cool. They usually don't photograph that well.
But this car indeed has a history. In September of 1927, it was delivered to the then chairman of Bentley Motors, Wolf Banato, Captain Wolf Banato. Many of these young men, you know, had been in the army in the First World War. But Bennato was quite different, I think, in many ways, because he was a man about town, and he inherited the family fortune, which was a diamond fortune that came out of South Africa. His father was at some point in time 50% owner of the Kimberley mines. Anyhow, coming back to 1927, Bennato, of course, as president of Bentley Motors, was in a position to order a car to his own complete specification. Now, in those days, factories or works, as they called them in England, like Bentley, they produced the chassis only with an engine and the wheels and the bonnet. But then you took the car of the chassis to a coach builder. And in this case, a company called H.J. Mulliner, which had a wonderful reputation for making beautiful bodies on cars. Now, Wolf Bennato wanted a fast car, thus he specified a very light-bodied or very light coachwork that would not hinder his speed, you know, his in transition. So this is a result you see here, because the car is, you know, for more than 90% actually exactly as it was delivered to him 81 years ago. The vintage Bentleys you see around here were made actually only in a period of 10 years. The first were put on the road in 1923, but of course they had worked on them 1 or 2 years before, and the last one was actually produced in 1931, when the company went bankrupt, you know, after the hard times of the Depression. But they were then taken over by Rolls-Royce. Anyhow, they started out making a 4-cylinder, wonderful car. There are a few of them around here, 3-liter cars. Then, in 1927, the year that this was produced, they started making the bigger cars, the 6-cylinder cars, 6.5 liters. So this, you know, at that time was a very powerful car, really. And it is still today. Tremendous torque, wonderful to drive. I also wanted to say everyone here is in a way a caretaker, a curator of this rolling piece of history.
It's a fun hobby, and this is like a family reunion, only better because you don't get to pick your family, but you can pick who you go on a tour with. So it's a fun group.
This is a 1927, what they call a 4.5-liter example. It is a Van den Pla bodied car, one that's quite original. It is one that we purchased about 3.5 years ago from Bill Ruger, whose dad had it in his family since 1954. It's a fairly pedestrian but very interesting vehicle, in the sense that it's all original, with the exception of the rear tires, which Mr. Ruger modified, or changed I should say, for better touring. We haven't put a great many miles on the car, but on this particular trip drove it about 360, 370 miles, relatively entirely trouble-free. It's been a real pleasure driving it, the exception only being the rain that we had for 3.5 hours when we drove it up from central Massachusetts. My name is LeMaitre, I'm French, and while I call that a frog, it's really a toad. And it's a radiator ornament that I've had for the last 20 or 25 years, which I had on my desk, hoping to find someday a car that I thought it would be appropriately mounted on. But let's agree that it is a frog-like toad. So it qualifies for participation in these meets here with a frog at the wheel.
Well, this is not my Bentley, it's Bill Ruger Jr.'s Bentley. He bought it from England, sight unseen from an auction. It was in very poor condition. It was stored in a barn since the early 50s, very poor barn. The wood had rotted away and the fenders were all jammed, and it was in bad shape. The gas tank had rotted away, portions of it. I pulled the drain plug out of the fuel cell and the fuel tank, and there was a big glob of tar and old fuel that dropped out. It had been in there for 40 years at least. We sent it off to Fran Roxas. I did some work on it, dropped the oil pan and took a compression test and sort of went through the mechanics, and everything seemed to be sound. So we sent it off to Fran Roxas in Chicago. He worked 2 years on this car, restoring it. We changed the top design and a few other things. There'd been some work done on it in the 30s that we took away and just had it done. It's a marvelous car. It runs great now. The engine we'll probably take apart this next winter because we haven't taken it apart, and put in some new pistons and new rings and valve jobs and all of that.
The Bentley drivers, especially these vintage Bentleys, like to drive them very much. And accordingly, there are a lot of Bentley tours. And and a lot of us go on rather regularly is this so-called North American vintage Bentley tour. And it tends to be more like New England than North American. But that suits me fine because I'm from New England. And though last year we were in Cooperstown, New York, had a wonderful time with that very beautiful and I think accommodating town and countryside. And a few years ago when we were also in northern New Hampshire and so on. But and today I understand we're going over towards the islands at the north of Lake Champlain. And perhaps in New York State. I haven't read the book. I like to be surprised. Any car is pretty reliable if it's used every day. But as it happens with these old cars, whether they're Bentleys or any other kind, they're often used infrequently, with my experience with old cars, that a busy machine is a happy machine.
Well, this Bentley was built in the year of our Lord, 1926. It's a 3-liter speed model, and the speed model had a slightly hopped up camshaft and some other goodies like that. And it's what's known as a red label up here. So if you see a car with a red label, right away you'll know that that's a speed model 3-liter. And I bought this car in March of 1985. Driven it a fair amount, including in 2000, my wife Mary Jo and I did the Bentley Drivers Club European Rally. So we sent the car into England and then the ferry over to France and toward the Chateau region, and then we were in Belgium, Germany, France, Austria, Switzerland,
2,300
Italy.
miles, and every major alpine pass in Europe, this little 3-liter did.
Including the Stelvio, without ever having to back up, except once when a German motorcyclist tried to commit suicide.
49 hairpin turns. This car has the heart of a giant. It may be the baby Bentley, but it has the heart of a giant, we say.
It's a 4.5 liter Vanden Plas Tour that I acquired a little over 20 years ago, I guess. I've had Speed 6s and a great big 8-liter Bentley touring car, and I decided, having come to this meet for 27, this is the 27th year, I've been on 26 of them, that I decided, riding with other people on occasions, that of all the vintage Bentleys, this was probably the model that was the most desirable to have for all-around purposes. I put this car with Vintage Sports Car Club on Lime Rock track and race it. And you can't really do that with the bigger cars, although on long tracks, some people with Speed 6s do race. 3 liters race, but they tend to be underpowered, so they're not terribly competitive. So that's been my experience anyway.
Well, this is not really my car, and if you ask the people around here, they'll say, oh, that's Dale Power's car. Because Dale owned it and toured extensively with it.
But you're claiming it now.
No, I
It's
just,
still Dale Power's car?
especially since Dale gave me the lifetime warranty with it. And also, the other thing about this car, this is very unique. I don't have to worry whether it finishes or not. Dale, every day, has to make sure that I finish, because it's going to be so embarrassing if he sold me a car that wasn't 100%. So he always comes over at the end of the day and says, hey, are you all right?
I think he ought to get you a new tire since it's under warranty.
Right.
I will talk to him about that.
So, Mr. Powers did you right then, I guess, huh?
Is this on the record or off the record?
This is off the record.
Off the record, of course. I mean, the warranty alone must be worth it.
It's not clear whose lifetime we're talking about. And he did say the other day, he said, "Oh, lifetime. Let's see. So if you were no longer around, that would expire. That would end the warranty, wouldn't it?"
It's a 1927 Bentley. It's a 6-cylinder, and it has twin carburetors. So some people called it a twin 6 or a speed 6, and this body is very rare. It's a Gills and Sons body, manufactured in England, and there are only 2 of this type. This is one of 2 that we know of, and the body was put on almost immediately. It was put on in 1930, and that's all I know is a great comfortable car with this body, and we enjoy it very much.
It's a 25 3-liter chassis, number 946. We only made 999 cars with a 2 or 3 digit serial number. I'm kind of proud of this one. Dad bought it in '66 in London. Brought it home. I parked it in the driveway the first day we brought it home from Philadelphia dock, and I got out of it, left it running. The next thing I knew, Lynn was going off down the field driving it away. So we go back pretty far with a history of having fun with this car. We've been on every one of the NAVBMs except one, and that was because it was en route to do the Millennium Tour in England that year. So it's been around the block a time or two. Been rebuilt a time or two. And in between, we've had a lot of fun with it.
Well, this is a red label Bentley, which was they started the red label Bentleys in 1924, and that is the car that went a little bit faster, had dual carburetors rather than one carburetor. And this car, if you look in here, in 1926, the Bentley company was in bad financial condition, and they had to sell cars. And what they did, if you look down here at the motor number is very seldom the same as the chassis number, but this has an SS on it, and that actually stands for Super Sport. And they put the Super Sport engines into the cars in 1926 to sell them. And this is what they call a Le Mans tuned engine, or a Super Sport, which is the 100-mile-an-hour engine. They built 15 100-mile-an-hour cars in 1924 and 5. And so this is the same engine as that. I don't think this car will do 100 miles an hour, but it'll get very close. There were about 90 cars like this built in 1926. They built 135 red labels. They built 400 cars total, 403 liters total, 135 red labels. And I went through the list and I found about 90 Van der Pla red labels built. They're a great car to drive. They really are a superb automobile to drive. Even the 3-liter cars, which are the smaller engine, they just drive down the road at 60 miles an hour, no problem at all.
This is the first tour that this particular car has been on since the refit of some rework of the mechanics and the cosmetics and changing it around. I've had the car for about 10 years, and there was a period of about 5, maybe 6 years where it was in storage. It had been used quite aggressively and was no longer serviceable. When I purchased the car, it actually had been in dead storage for about another 5 to 8 years beforehand. And the configuration at that time was that the entire car was green. You had green headlights, green fog lights, you had green fenders, green wheels, you had a green body, green upholstery, a green dashboard, and green carpeting. The only thing that wasn't green, 2 things that weren't green, was the convertible top and the chrome grille on the front. Everything else on the car was just flat green. So I wanted to give it a little bit of color and some kind of a 3-dimensional pizzazz to it. So first thing I decided to do was to take the spare tires. There was a spare tire on each side of the cowl, and it made the car look chunky and stubby. And so I took them and moved them to the rear, and that blocked the access for a luggage trunk that was back there. So I decided to do away with the luggage trunk. The fuel tank at the time was a small fuel tank, about a 17-gallon or so, and the tank was leaking. I had to redo the tank regardless. So if I was going to do a new tank, I decided to do the larger 40-45 gallon racing tank and then mount the spare tires off the back of the frame. And one thing led to another. I ended up losing the trunk. So then I had to come up with additional space to be able to put old cars, need tools, spare parts, and things to keep them going. So I came up with the running board toolbox arrangement. And on the driver's side, since there is no driver's door and you got the emergency brake handle, I've got the toolbox is raised above the running boards, but the access to get into the toolbox goes in through the box to the lower end on back through. And on the other side, since it does have two-door access for both the front passenger driver as well as the rear passengers, I just did a hinged step plate. So on this one, all the access, fire extinguisher for immediate access here, and that just sort of sits there in the gasketing. With all the rain we've been driving through, they seem to be doing their job of staying nice and tight and dry.
It's a good day, much fewer potholes, a few people being very slow at stoplights, but other than that, we're doing all right. But the real key today is Dave Brownell and Marion Savage are out with their black 3-liter. It actually runs. They don't have that silly red Mercedes 200D out here.
And they think they're not going to get wet today, but
that's right.
Cool. So they...
Here she is, speaking of the devil.
Hey.
That's the Mercedes salute to us.
Oh yeah.
It's a 1924 3-liter. It's serial number 564. It's a long wheelbase model. It was delivered on April 24th, 1924, and I took delivery quite by coincidence 60 years to the day later. It came out of Long Island to me. It was bought in the early 70s in England from a dealer in London, and it went to Colorado, where it went through a couple of owners there. Traveled Mexico, Canada, all over the place. Finally, it was traded by one of the Colorado owners to Long Island Auto Museum in Southampton, New York, and that's who I got it from.
Yeah. So this is what the guys were talking about?
Oh yes, the Less Than Noble brothers.
They said that was the highlight of the day.
Yeah, they've been jerking my chain ever since I started driving my Mercedes up here.
So how are you guys doing today?
So good.
Yeah?
No drama.
No drama, huh? We'll take care of that.
How's the toes?
They're wonderful.
We see you're still wearing your flip-flops.
I only have flip-flops.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning,
Peter?
not too bad. Here are your official instructions. Again, when you come to a turning that is not signposted, at the sign, the road that you're going on to, the name of will be put in parentheses.
Now I want you to know we got our answers from places that other people probably didn't get their answers from.
Cheated.
It's the first time the car ever went over 20 miles in one day.
When my son was growing up, aged roughly 11, coming on 12, we built first a small kit car one winter from a Volkswagen using the axles, you know, on a fiberglass body. And the next year I asked him if he'd really like to build a proper car, and he said yes, very interested. So I searched around for an old Bentley, and we finally found one in a barn that was with 6 or 7 other old cars owned by a widow whose husband had collected them over the years. The kids had grown up in the family playing on these cars. All the glass was broken. The upholstery actually had a squirrel living in it. It was a wreck. And underneath the engine was a huge pool of oil. But we negotiated a price, and a friend with a trailer came down with me one day, and we dragged it off home. By then, my son had discovered girls, and he did not in fact help me very much to restore it. But we got it on the road in about 2 years. That would be in the it was the late 70s. And then in 1980, I think it was, George Schutz called me up and said he was running this vintage meet for people that own W.O. Bentley cars and would like to come. So I came up in 1980 for the very first one in Queechee, Vermont. And I think I've made all of them except one, and that's when the car was too broken to bring. Of course, an 80-year-old piece of machinery doesn't work perpetually, but that's how I got into it. This is about the only time I use the car. I just come up for this meet once a year. I travel a lot now with my boat, and wherever I am in May, I find a mooring for it and fly home for the rally.
We're going to have a toast to W.O. Bentley, because without him, we wouldn't all be here. And because of him, we're all having a great time with our wonderful cars.
Typically we have awards, and it was one of the things I completely forgot about in organizing this tour. I was tough enough to get the routes done where we were going to eat lunch. So I never thought about it, and Dale said to me, what are we doing about awards? And I said, what awards? And then he said, well, what did we do with the awards last year? And between the two of us, we couldn't think of a single thing we did with awards last year, but apparently somebody must have won them. This year, we're going to start, we're going to use the same awards, but we're going to have one new award, and unfortunately the recipients have already left because they heard they were getting it. And I thought, you know, we're more than well aware of the fact that we have these enormous increases in our gas prices and all, and it's really changed our traveling habits, as you could tell from this week. We shortened the routes down by 3 to 4 miles to offset things. And I thought it was only appropriate that we start a new award called Friends of OPEC. And the first recipient should be Howard Fafard with his motor coach. He unfortunately heard about the fact I was going to give this and left early. So we'll pin it to the motorhome tonight later after a couple more drinks.
Okay, now Eric, we normally give you the trophy at this point.
Yes.
Well, it's going to be a little different tonight. You've got to find out where the trophy is. Okay, so it's up to you for the next 12 months to figure out where this trophy is and get it. You earned it. Congratulations.
Oh, thank
you. You earned the trophy.
During recent years, we have watched with admiration the indomitable spirit of one of our Bentley friends who, in spite of many problems, has kept coming to our NAVBM. It is with joy, and I think we can say pleasure, that Doug and I, because we have talked about this, would like to pay tribute to our special friend, Bill Lasseter, and also to his wonderful wife, partner, and companion, but especially to our good friend, Bill, who has, in spite of many hardships, kept coming to our meet, and I would say an inspiration for all of us here. Bill, I hope you will accept this tribute, this recognition for what you are, and perhaps what we feel the friendship, the camaraderie of the Bentley hobby can do for us. So, Bentley, I will come down to you, and shall we go down to Bill? Yeah.
And the nominees are Kurt and then Heather Ferger, Bob and Becky Thomas,
George Clayton Green and his entourage, including Jennifer, Kathy Ryan, Malcolm Lee, and finally Sharon Saul, and Cheryl and Gary Hunter. And of those, all four of those had 20 or more questions correct out of 27. And the top three were within three correct answers. And I have an envelope here that was carefully guarded by our accountants that you saw recently, signed by none other than George Washington, who I can confirm is the signer of the $1 million note that we just saw over here. And so without any more further ado, the winner of the 2008 Mystery Rally is Sharon Saul, Cheryl, and Gary Hunter. They had nearly, and it must be said, they had nearly a perfect score. And from memory, last year, George Green and his crew were second. They were second again. So they're, you're close. You're real close. Could a representative of the team come up?
Come up here and take a picture of yourself, Cheryl. You can't, Cheryl. You got to get up here. You can't take a picture of yourself from over there. Come over here.
Cheryl worked hard on this. This Cheryl was my backseat person.
It showed. And I don't know what Ann was doing.
Ann was in the other car. Yes.
Yoko. Well, Sharon just barely qualified because she drove the car at the last minute.
Yeah, I did.
She did. She really did. I checked that out tonight because I did have it leaked out who was going to be the winner, and I had to verify they were not driving the SUV. So she did drive the car tonight, and she was telling me there were technical problems that she found out the gas pedal was in the center. That was 25 miles into the rally. I enjoyed doing this, and I hope you all enjoyed it, and let's all go down the bar.